This is Lecture 3 of Chapter 1, The Political Landscape for PLS 211, U.S. Government 1. When we talk about attitudinal change and reform, well, there's plenty of that to go around too. First, let's look at ideology and experience. Both of those greatly affect how we view our government. It's now part of our political culture to expect negative campaigns, dishonest politicians, and political pundits who bash our leaders and institutions at every chance they get. Most people get their news about government from electronic media, from network news such as ABC, NBC, CBS, cable news such as CNN, C-SPAN, and Fox, and even the internet, with a huge range from Time and New York Times Online to the Drudge Report and a whole bunch of others. There's been a proliferation of news magazine shows as well. These changes have forced media outlets to be even more interested in the scoop. In other words, they want to be the first to air or report some event. This leads to increased reporting of scandals and rumors that often turn out to be, well, wrong. This 24/7 instant news report access concept that the current media has pretty much limits thoughtful commentary and encourages shallow reporting. The visual nature of the electronic media also leads to stories covering interesting images instead of reporting on important issues of the day. Looking at American politics this way leads us to an understanding of why so many people in our society are just uninformed and, well, rather pessimistic. We also need to be more attuned to how we are viewed in the world. The United States used to be seen as a beacon of liberty, and now we're seen as decadent, immoral, and hypocritical. We champion democracy, yet we support dictators. We claim to be humanitarian, yet we do little for Darfur. For much of the world, what they know of America is McDonald's, Coca-Cola, American movies, which are full of violence and sex, and American TV, which is also full of violence and sex, and other things that are similar. What image would you want to have of America if that was all you saw? There's also high expectations that go along with it. Americans expect the government to do everything. And our expectations of government are increasing, and they have been for a long time. When people have problems, they often demand that the government fix them. And that's been happening for over 200 years. So of course government today does much more than it did in the 1790s. In addition, the government has gotten larger and stronger in response to various crises such as war, economic depression, and social unrest. Campaigns also lead Americans to expect more of government. Every campaign promise offered by a candidate leads some to expect the government to solve yet another problem. And when it doesn't solve these problems, it adds more to the public cynicism. The political and economic systems have become far more complex, and the educational system is no longer plays the same socialization role it once did. Many Americans have no idea what government actually does for them. In addition, personal responsibility seems to have declined, and people often find it easier to blame the government for their problems than to accept their own failings. This has many implications for politics, including an even larger and more powerful government. Many of those topics are actually covered in PLS 212, the second section of U.S. government. So please consider taking that in a future semester. Now, we also have very little sense of history in this country. How many times have you guys heard someone say something like, "For the first time in history, this is the worst flood in history. There has never been a crime wave like this before. Government has never been more powerful than it is today," and so on, and so on, and so on. Most of these statements are usually not true, and they're quite frankly exaggerated. Nor does it seem to be true that everyone in this generation will be less off than they were in the previous generation. Life expectancy is up, as is the quality of life. In 1970, only 11% of people graduated college. In 2002, 26% of people graduated college, and you guys are well on your way to doing that too. Cable TV was virtually non-existent in the 1970s, and now almost 70% of households have it. The same is true of computers. Today, more than 51% of homes have a PC. The poverty rate has held fairly constant in the last 30 years, so things really aren't as bleak as we often tend to think they are. However, that has come under attack because it's also predicated upon outdated ideas about the percentage of someone's income used to pay for housing, food, and other necessities. Polls show that only 23% of Americans actually trust our politicians. Scandals are plentiful, and the media cover them with great glee. Recent scandals include Mark Foley's inappropriate liaisons with House pages, and scandals related to Jack Abramoff, Tom DeLay, Bob Ney, and others. Did you guys catch in the news recently about Arnold Schwarzenegger and his love child? There you go, there's another scandal. It's no wonder Americans are distrustful of the people they elect. Despite these attitudes, most politicians are hardworking, honest people who actually try to make their country better. The public servants take pride in helping their constituents and their country. Is voter apathy a problem? Are people confronted with too many choices and are just simply weary? Is there enough information about the candidates and the issues? Are we just too busy? Or do we lack any real choices? Do we think our vote doesn't matter? Are we content? And is voter turnout a problem at all? These are difficult questions, and they don't have easy answers. But we're going to consider them as we progress through this course, and perhaps we can see if we can come up with any ideas about which are actually important questions, and if they have any answers that we can provide. Finally, we'll wrap up this lecture and the chapter by discussing how we can redefine our expectations concerning, reform. Politics involve conflict. Since each of us has different ideas, values, and ideologies, which I hope you have discussed in your introductory post and the discussion forum, we've become more diverse as a society. We'll most likely not be able to govern ourselves on the basis of consensus. There's gonna be winners, and there's gonna be losers. Not everybody can be happy when it comes to making public policies for the people. Government can't cure all the problems, but it does serve many important purposes, and it's always going to play a major role in addressing social problems. Frustration and dissatisfaction come with change, and perhaps we are in the period in which we redefine our expectations of government and of ourselves in the light of all the changes of the last few decades. Government is responding to the changes in society. An unprecedented number of retirements from Congress in 1994 and 1996 might be an indicator that it's harder today to please voters and less pleasant to work in public service. The United States has lived through many trying times with our Constitution and system still intact. National crises can be crucibles for difficult political and social changes. We have survived and we have thrived through slavery and emancipation, wars and depressions, terrorist attacks, and even anthrax. And so chances are we're still going to adapt to the changes yet to come as well. That ends the lecture, number 3, and wraps up Chapter 1.